It's Crazy John Carrots here on OSH Radio, and today I'm here with Brent Thomas, and he has the website Paranormal Portal. He does a podcast, and he also has your stuff up on YouTube. I think you said also, right?
That's correct. Yep. Yep. Thanks
Now,
for
maybe
having
you could. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, sure. Glad to have you. Uh, Now, how long have you been doing the Paranormal Portal?
I started in about April of 2016, so I think this is the 8th year now.
That's
Eight.
good. And I know I said I was going to get you to tell us what got you into having that exactly, and what did you do? What did you do before that? Did you do any other kind of website before that, or was this your first endeavor
No, this
like
is
this?
this is my first broadcasting endeavor ever. In it kind of just I was one of those late bloomers. I never really knew my whole life what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I had friends that knew even from a young age what they wanted to do, and I felt like, man, there's something wrong with me. I have no idea what I want to do. I did a lot of things. I did a lot of careers and professions, and like everything from managing IT and installing networks and routers to education. I taught computers on a high school level. I worked retail, construction, factories, just so many things. I was in corrections, as an employee, not.
I was going to ask that if you were correcting or being corrected, or
No,
some of both, probably.
I was trying to correct, but didn't always work out real well. But anyway, yeah. So I've had a real diverse career, and I was like, oh, what am I going to figure out what I want to do? So I was working advertising, and there was a company I worked for that also contracted to a gentleman by the name of Chris Geo, who did their IT for them and a lot of development, web and app development. And he and I got to talking, and he had also founded and ran Truth Frequency Radio, or TFRlive.com. And, it just, it was weird. The idea just came to me like an epiphany, like, I want a show. And as soon as I said that, the idea, I know what it's called, I know what I want to do. And it was just because I've been a fan of the paranormal my entire life. And so it was like this was just waiting for me to find it. And then it just came like, boom, Paranormal Portal. I want to, do these YouTube shows, radio shows, podcasts came later, much later, but it was just like, finally, I found my thing. And I've been loving it ever since. There's that old saying, it's like, if you find what you love doing and you do it, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I found it. This is it. So it only took me a long time though, but I finally got there.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you did. I found sometimes when you try and take things that are hobbies that you really love and you try to make it into a job,
Hmm.
sometimes it loses some of you lose some of your love for it because it becomes a little bit entangled with everything else. But I
Sure.
hope you don't have that happen to you. I hope it keeps going and you're
Oh, sure.
happy with it. That would be
Yeah.
great.
I mean, it certainly comes with its share of challenges and trials, and trying to make things all fit together and work, and sometimes it's as something like, what do I do the next show on, and you kind of just grind your head and figure it out, but everything does seem to fall together and come together, and it's been incredibly successful for me. So I guess that's the universe going, yep, you're where you belong. So
I was going to say, you got to let the synchronicity guide you in what your next show should be about.
yeah.
It's kind of like I do kind of believe that very heavily in the synchronicity thing, and sometimes how that shows you that what you're doing is right, not wrong. I'll give you an example. I think I said this on one of my other interviews. I sold my big house in central Pennsylvania and bought a small condo in Jersey by the beach. And it's nice because when you're out doing your runs, you can stop at the beach or stop at the boardwalk because you're within, a nice, easy little drive.
Hmm.
But, the whole time I'm doing it, I'm like having doubts. And the first time we get to, it was a house that I tried to get, then I couldn't get because they decided not to go with me. And then later on, it came back to me and it's like, ooh, that's weird in itself.
Hmm.
Now I ended up getting a house that I wasn't able to. First time I went in the house, sitting there was the exact same shampoo I use at my house, sitting in the bathroom of that house. And it's like that weird because I told them there was extra stuff they didn't need to clean out. I was fine with what was left. And I'm
Hmm.
like, well, that's a weird sign that shampoo, exactly the kind I use, is sitting there. And then the day we moved into it, I was changing the door combination because it has a door combination,
Okay.
the buttons. And my sister goes, "Oh, 1224," which is what it was. It's not that anymore. Was actually our grandparents' street address.
Oh, neat.
And I'm
Oh,
like, "Well, that's a weird coincidence." And then I thought, okay, in honor of that, I'm going to change it to what our parents' street address was. So then let's say it was 2018. There's a reason why I'm saying that.
sure.
So that's what I changed it to. So then we went for pizza, and the pizza bill came to exactly, let's say, 2018.
Wow.
Well, it was the exact number that I just got done changing the lock on the house to. And it's like, and that made me feel like even though I was having doubts, there was a lot of things creeping up
Hmm.
that enough synchronicities creeping up that made me feel, no, this was right, even if I did have my concerns. So when
Right.
I say that about the synchronicity showing you the way, I actually think sometimes it does,
Sure.
you
Absolutely.
know,
Yep.
which is kind of what, what the top things that people consider paranormal. And I had a discussion with someone else the other day, and they asked me if I ever had weird things happen. I'm like, well, I think we all have stuff happen, but what's normal for one person, paranormal for another person, might
Yeah.
be different. There might be things, voices you hear that talk to you all the time that you think nothing of,
Hmm.
that somebody else might think, "Oh, that's really weird." And you're like, "What's weird about it?" That's
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, it's. I think we all have things that happen to us. I think
Mhm.
some people explain them, figure out ways to explain them, and some people can't explain them. So
Yeah.
that was just my little tangent. Tell me more about you and your show, and what got you interested in doing this exact kind of a show.
Well, I do several different kind of shows really because I mean every topic is generally like doing a different show. Like if it's a Bigfoot or cryptozoology, Dogman, Nessie, et cetera, versus UFO versus ghosts and versus strange phenomena. So they're all very different topics, and I like that because it gives me a lot of latitude on where I can go with the shows. It's not like my show is called Dogman's Frolicking or whatever, because then you're really fixated on that and you've got to drill into that over and over and over and over. But I've got a pretty big spectrum that I can work with, and I've really enjoyed it. When I first started doing this, I was like, well, I know about this stuff. I've been reading about it for years, watching every TV show and read some books and articles and surfed the web. And I was like, I know this stuff. And then you dive into it and you realize how deep these rabbit holes go. It's just incredible that, there's so many layers to every one of these phenomena. It's like, there's not just ghosts, there's, potentially ghosts, then there's non-human entities, which ghosts I usually classify as was formerly people, ghosts and spirits, but everything kind of falls under spirits, even though it's could be a very diverse range of things from, demons to angels to, formerly living people to maybe things that were never human but exist to us in a spiritual sense. But I mean, there's just such an amazing depth to all of this. And as you dive into it, it's like, man, I didn't know anything when I got started. Now, once you start diving in, you're talking to people, hearing about their experiences and looking at these experiences through their eyes. And just like, wow, there's so much to know. And it's probably impossible to know. But the thing that I love about this subject area is a lot of people look at the paranormal as, well, this is where reality went sideways, where something just glitched or there's something went, upside down. And honestly, I don't think that that's the case at all. I just think that maybe the profoundly, divine reason for us to experience the paranormal is that it's teaching us that the reality we think we understand is just a cosmetic version, and that reality is so much more dynamic, and there's so many more layers to all of this existence, and it keeps us yearning and looking and searching. And so I really think that part of the possibility of Tesla's statement that when we start exploring the non-physical, we'll learn more than we have in all of recorded history. Well, part of that is this stuff, a lot of it, because there's things going on that defy our traditional understanding of physics. You know, reality is often regarded as this concrete box. You know, it's got this, it's rigid, it has rules, and we exist in this you know, quote unquote cage. But I think that this stuff is probably the breadcrumbs teaching us of the incredible dynamic nature of reality and that we're a part of, but we've somehow lost track of. And so that's the exciting part of it for me.
No, it's interesting and some good points there too. But I like to think about the layers too, because one of the things that's big right now is, of course, the multiverse thing. Everything talks about the multiverse, which I do believe is possible. But what
Mhm.
about the fact that there's just more layers to even just this universe?
Absolutely.
Not only is there a multiverse, but multiple layers to this universe. I
Yeah.
had a class in studying space
Mhm.
one time, and this was not that long ago. And the professor actually mentioned in his class that the laws of nature as we understand them, the laws of science and nature, might not apply to every place, even in our own universe. And
Uh-huh.
we don't know that. You
Mhm.
know, what happens out there because of the different effects of things. Our laws, what we consider laws of nature and laws of science, might not necessarily hold up. So if you think about the fact that people can even talk about that in regular science as an issue, what makes you think that there can't be things that we might not understand or just don't have the perspective to see? What if there's, you know, that old perspective of a two-dimensional being looking at the three-dimensional world?
Right.
What would they see? They wouldn't see the full world
Right.
because they had no perception to see the whole world. And maybe we're like that, you know, that's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. The two-dimensional being would only be able to perceive the two dimensions of its existence in that three-dimensional space. And you know, when you think about the scientific model as it exists currently, I think they've mathematically proven up to 11 dimensions. And you know, we are only currently capable of perceiving, well, four if you consider time the fourth dimension. You know, and so that leaves a lot going on around us that we can't perceive. And the interesting thing is, you know, when you think about the whole of reality, a lot of things go on all the time. You know, what is the saying? Like our brain perceives millions of things happening per second, but our mental capacity has to filter it down to just, you know, a small group of that in order to feed us our experience. So there's things going on us around us that are being perceived somehow by our total ability, but we just can't mentally process that. So everything gets chopped down. And then when you consider the light spectrum, which is so much more broad than the visible light spectrum that we can appreciate, and the sound spectrums and stuff. So there, I mean, there are things going on around us that we, without special tools or even, you know, maybe not even possible currently, we can't experience all of those things, but we know that there's so much going on that's already outside of our perceivable reality.
Right, right. I can very much believe that. I tell you, something interesting to me is that, you know, people always talk about AI coming up and artificial intelligence. And I watched a show where there was a spiritual thing happening in space, and the AIs and the robots could not see it, but the
Mm.
humans could.
Oh,
And they wanted to be able to understand it, but they couldn't because they just did not perceive it. So that was kind of interesting in that same thing. They were limited too because maybe there are some things that we do perceive sometimes that we
mhm.
don't realize how we're perceiving it, and therefore if it can't be exactly defined, we couldn't pass it on to a machine to necessarily that
Oh,
we build to perceive it. So they
right.
could be even more inhibited than us. So that was
Yeah.
just an interesting twist there. But I tell you an interesting thing. So now you've done a whole bunch of shows over the years. What can you say were one of your favorite shows that you enjoyed doing that you really felt you got a lot from?
You know, to be honest, and this sounds like a really canned, easy answer, but it's honest to God, the truth is that I love diving into all of this stuff because I really am fascinated. And, you know, I guess the root impetus for me to do this at all is because I've experienced paranormal events in my life. and trying to piece together what happened, what was going on there, why did that happen. So it's been this lifelong journey to try to understand it, and then of course to have the benefit of having this platform and the benefit of talking with such a wide spectrum of an array of people, from personal experiencers to researchers to authors and media personalities, just to be able to pick their brains about what they think about this stuff is really fascinating. But there isn't one topic area that I'm more passionate about than others. There's things that I'm less how do I say this without sounding judgmental, but there's things that I'm less able to process on a personal level because I even though I'm a believer in all of this stuff, I still have a very logical process when I examine and look at things, and I can't dismiss logic. And I think unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the paranormal communities that just suspend logic because they have a confirmation bias. They want things to be real, so they're willing to overlook some of the red flags, if you will. And I'm not saying something is real or not unless you're there and in person. It's hard to know, but there are some things that are just hard for me to process that other people just readily accept, like, oh yeah, I believe in that for sure. And one of the things that's been a real struggle for me personally, I guess I'm kind of reverse answering your question, but
No, you're doing fine.
one of the things that I have a hard time processing is something like, the idea that, for instance, Bigfoot is this some sort of primate hominid being that still exists in the wilds of America. Definitely leaves footprints. Has been observed eating, taking prey. Has left hair and breaking trees. All of these things have been observed at one point or another. Footprints have been cast, hair has been collected, and there is footage out there that I think is very legitimate. But allegedly, some people have seen these things just melt into nothing. Like they're there and then they're not there. And how does that happen? Now, it's hard for me to jump right onto that. And I'm not saying it's not possible. This is my logical process. I want to understand, how is that possible? Because when I think of Bigfoot, and this is maybe a really bad characterization of them, but they are some sort of wild or feral being that lives in the wilds of the world. And it seems to be not technologically smart. I can't speak to their spirituality or whatever, but they seem to live in the wilds of the world. And yet somehow they have been given this ability, according to some people, that they can just not be in this world. They can just melt away and be somewhere else. And it's like, well, how does that happen? How could that happen, that you could have something that's very solidly physical and to the tune of 6, 7, 800 to 1,200 pounds or more, and then suddenly it's intangible and gone. Where did that mass go? Where did that matter go? And
Maybe it has access to other dimensions and it
it
slips
could
in between the other dimensions.
it could, and but that's the hard part to wrap my head around. It's like, well, why then, as what maybe it's a prejudice, but it's like, here we have, and I'm not overly I don't know, how do I say this without sounding like a jerk? But, I mean, people have achieved some incredible things and we have the ability to examine, and yet we can't find any other example in nature that seems to exhibit this incredible ability. That and the cloaking, the idea that something exists in our world physically, but it's not able to be seen or perceived. So, because Bigfoot are attributed with both of these things, and it's like, but how? And again, I want to be the first to say, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just, this is where my head runs into walls. It's like, but how? How
Well,
can
I agree with you, though. I just brought up the access to
Sure,
multiple dimensions because that's what we had already talked about. I
sure.
often think of Bigfoot as possibly a concept that's just been promoted between bears and escaped gorillas and chimpanzees from circuses and carnivals that have been around for a long time, and that the
Mhm.
reason that they walk differently and act differently is because they could be semi-trained,
Mhm.
and that might be what they really are, and there just could be a myth built around it. That's kind of what I think sometimes.
Yeah.
But
I,
then, there are people that have like the theory, like you were saying, they melt, they disappear. And I think, like we were saying, maybe they have access to a different dimension because they're more of a spiritual being, or they're more spiritually evolved than us. But
mhm.
that to me does seem harder to grasp and realize. But then again, too, I hope something like that could be possible. I'd like to be able to do that myself. I mean, that
Amen.
would be nice. So, sometimes you hear things that people say, and I would say that I take it with a grain of salt.
Hmm.
And you think, I don't know. But sometimes I'd rather not totally close the book on it, because what if that is right? And what
Sure.
if it just is something we haven't realized yet? I mean, I
Right.
like the one quote in the one Thor movie where he says, what you think of as magic, we think of as technology.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, so I kind of like to think about it that way. I don't, sometimes I too, somebody will be saying something about, like you said, like the Bigfoot just melted away, and I'll stand there and go, I don't know about that. But
Sure.
I don't necessarily want to close the book on it.
Right.
It
Right.
would be nice to be able to do myself. You go over to visit somebody you don't really like, you step into their closet, and you're back at your house playing a video game or
Sure.
something. Come
Right.
back out a while later, or that would be kind of nice. So I mean,
Sure.
things like that sometimes, like, I don't know. I guess that's kind of what you're saying, how you feel about some of the stuff too. It's,
Yeah.
you're not sure, but
Yep. I
it
just
will.
think there's no question these things are out there, in my opinion. I had a kind of a close call with what I believe to be one. I never saw it, but a really scary experience when I was a teenager back in Minnesota. But at the same time, I mean, I do believe they're out there. I think that, something very real is leaving these prints and leaving certainly what would appear to be a tangible evidence of their presence. But what about all this other stuff? I don't know. But again, I think that it's important to look at all this stuff through the eyes of a skeptic, because that confirmation bias, I don't think really moves the needle forward when you jump on board with any idea out there and you go, oh yeah, I believe that's true. I believe that could be true. And I think you have to challenge things with logic. And if for no other reason, then maybe it's my personal process, but it also, if you challenge things and still it's, and are able to, I don't know, run ideas against it, and maybe that's, if it still stands up after that kind of scrutiny, then it only helps to substantiate the event, in my mind. I think some people get really defensive about their ideas being challenged, but at the same time, I mean, you've got to put them to the test, and you've got to be willing to listen to all the people's opinions, because the one thing about all this is, and this is my personal peeve, is those people that are labeled, and a lot of times they're not labeling themselves this way, but they're being called experts in the paranormal, experts in Bigfoots, experts in whatever. And there aren't experts, because there can't be until we can actively and consistently study something. There can be no experts. Now, there's some incredibly intelligent people that have some incredible ideas about it that I think might be dead on, or might be, even way off in my own opinion. But until it can be actively tested and observed and recorded, and we just don't know. But I think currently one of the best evidences we have, just in the case of all of this stuff, whether it's ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoots, Dogman, etc., is witness testimony. And the reason why I believe that is because right now that's the only true evidences we have, is that people from all over the world in all walks of life, different social stations and statuses, and from the common everybody person to this, scientists, have experienced weirdness that they can't explain, and they come and talk about it. And at the very least, you're able to extrapolate consistencies through a body of evidence, through a body of reporting. You can kind of get a behavioral profile on some of this stuff, like Bigfoot, for instance, since that seems to be the flavor of the day. And I'm just bringing it up because it's come up so much. But if you consistently listen to Bigfoot reports, you can hear similarities repeated so often in so many people's stories, and I find that consistency really helps to establish, well, maybe this can create some kind of predictive model off of it, because you can learn, how do they move, what are people seeing, what are they behaving, why are they being drawn in to what's going on that they seem to be really curious about, or what are people doing that might be threatening to them, and you can kind of build almost like a profile, almost like a crime profile, or a serial killer profile. They look at these established patterns and they look for the consistencies, and then they extrapolate what things can we possibly use as predictive modeling, and maybe to learn how to draw them in so that they can be observed more readily and stuff like that. So I think and oftentimes people dismiss witness testimonies like, well, witnesses, they're unreliable. Well, maybe a witness is, but if you get consistent reports from people that are across the country and other countries or whatever, and they still have those core similarities, that to me is actually strengthens the idea that we can learn from those, and maybe be able to develop techniques to study it better, so that we can actively study these things rather than just hopefully stumbling into them.
So maybe that's your calling, or maybe somebody that's listening to this today will do that. Start tabulating all the witnesses of Bigfoot or other events too. I mean, and
Sure.
try to see what is common. And you're right, though. Anytime you look at data, I mean, that there's going to be some variables that are
Yeah.
far off here, far off there, and of course you throw those away. That's what you do.
Right. Yep.
So the person that tells you that Bigfoot turned into an elephant and then slithered under a rock, that one you take away. The one that they say knocked on the door and tried to sell them Girl Scout cookies, that one also gets thrown out. But if he's in your yard looking at your food when you're doing dinner or something, or playing with something in your yard or something, a bunch of people have experienced it.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff you keep. And I think that's an interesting project that one of these so-called, like you said, experts should work on. And I have to admit, it's funny you said that, because I did play a Bigfoot expert in a movie. So okay. I think, see, that was your synchronicity coming through. But I think that's a good point. And a lot of people in everything like to call themselves experts.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sure.
So
It sounds impressive. Hey, I'm a Bigfoot expert. Well, we better pay attention to you then. Well,
you've become a paranormal expert since you've had your show. See,
right. And I do paranormal investigating as well, but I'd never ever consider, putting the expert label on anyone, just because, again, it's all these unknowns. But again, through the body of reporting and stuff, I think we do stand to learn a lot, and that can teach us, at least maybe help to aim our efforts to learn more based on what we've extrapolated from what people are seeing and reporting.
well, getting away from Bigfoot, talking about things though, I was amazed years ago when they finally came forward, the government, and released some of those videos of UFOs. And I thought, well, this is amazing. And I realized it was on the news and everything, and nobody seemed to care.
Oh God.
I thought that was really weird.
I've
But
got
myself now, I flew up to the edge of space in a MiG-29 from Russia, where you just go up and break and come down. And I thought media would really be interested in that when I came back. I thought, this is neat. I went to the edge of space. They made a big deal when Bill Shatner just did it with Bezo, but I did it in an old Meg 27, which is 1977 technology.
Oof.
And I came back, one small local state TV station, and 3 local papers are all that covered it. The bigger papers, the bigger cities, because I live in the capital, because I retired from working for the government, for the state government in Pennsylvania, and the big paper, big stations, they didn't care about it. Philadelphia didn't care about it. Pittsburgh didn't care about it. And it's like, I was just in the edge of space. Nobody cared. But the same thing was when they released those videos of they don't call them UFOs. I forget they changed the what,
UAP,
huh?
UAP.
Yeah, UAP.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody seemed to care.
I know. And that's really interesting too, because that's been oftentimes a mainstay of, well, why won't they let us know what they know? And one of the ideas was that, well, if they let this out, it would just, civilization would fold up in itself, and people wouldn't be able to handle it. There'd be pandemonium. No one would go to church anymore. And they were released. And you're right. It was just like, well, that was just Tuesday. You know, so I think one of two things, well, maybe one of more things, but one of the things that I think is that by the time those things were released, this was already a discussion that most people have at least considered. And it wasn't a foreign idea. It's not like War of the Worlds with H.G. Wells, and people had never thought of this before, but suddenly there was an invasion. So, I mean, there was pandemonium, and maybe that's what the model they were basing this theory off of. But by the time that came around, we'd all seen movies with aliens. We'd seen Independence Day and Aliens, and God only knows how many different versions, Star Wars, etc. Where we'd been kind of conditioned in a sense, I think, just mentally to the idea that we're not alone. There's other things out there, and they're here, even ET and et cetera, et cetera. So the concept I don't think was quite as foreign, but back in the H.G. Wells times, I mean, it was absolutely, just a horrifying epiphany for people. But nowadays it's like, well, I hope they have lightsabers.
Well, I was thinking more like, he'd be the aliens would instantaneously become YouTube and TikTok big, and YouTube and TikTok,
Sure.
yeah, and
Go viral.
it's different. And it's interesting you mentioned that about the church. Stop going to church. And I have friends that have that thing is, there is no God, or our creator is actually an alien. And I'm like, okay, but when you have that logic, there's a problem with that logic. Who created the aliens?
Right.
You still miss who created who.
Yeah.
And people seem to forget that. That's like they just did that. Some people don't like Star Trek Discovery, some people do. I'm okay with it. I think they've
Sure.
done some bastardizations of Star Trek, but I still enjoy it for what it is. And when they finished that up, they finally found the people who were supposedly the creators, only to find the technology, the creators that actually found.
Mm-hmm.
So someone actually had created it before and used it before, but they don't necessarily know if the people they thought that used it were the creators, or they were other people that found it also. Right. So it kind of proves the fact that, they found who they thought were the creators, only for them to tell you, no, we're not the creators. We came along, found this, and created with it, but we didn't create it. Somebody else created it and created us. So,
Right. Yep.
It's that loop where people don't realize the logic does not say, aliens create us. Okay, sure. But still, how did the aliens get here?
Yeah.
That doesn't it doesn't solve a superior being of some type, or a force like the lightsabers you said, like the force, which could be good and evil, that permeates everything.
Sure.
It doesn't. There being aliens does not stop that from being there. There does not stop the concept of being some god creature, or god deity, or whatever you want to view God as, from being there. It doesn't stop that, and I think that's the biggest problem people think with science. They think because somebody believes in science that they don't believe in anything else. Like, scientists don't believe in God. I don't think that's true. Einstein believed in God. I mean, that's something that religious people say against scientists.
Sure.
That they don't believe in God. I think I see less scientists saying people don't believe in science than people saying scientists don't believe in God. So,
yeah. And that brings up a good point, and this is kind of a side note, but when you consider science is funded, and science is directed by funding, and that's where it loses its purity, if you will. I mean, because for generations there was no harm in smoking until there was harm in smoking. They had science to prove it was harmless, and suddenly there was a big hole in that. And so that's the caveat there, and anything done by human is fallible, in my opinion. But I just heard a quote. It's funny you should bring this up because, and it was kind of a meme that floated by, and I haven't verified the quote, but I thought it was very profound. And it was a quote from a very famous person, and that escapes me who that was as far as a scientist. But the person allegedly said, a little knowledge of science creates atheists, but those invested in incredibly involved in science creates believers. And I was like, wow. And I think there's truth to that, because I think the more that you unravel the parts of the universe, the more that you realize that, my God, there's just such balance and synchronicity, and everything is just perfectly so. One thing out of alignment could create absolute chaos and make this all impossible. And yet here we are. I mean, that it is a profound thing. So, I mean, I'm with you. I have no doubt that there's a divine consciousness that's the root of all of this. And but you're right. There's also those people that just I don't know, and it's kind of sad. Those people that don't believe are so fanatical about not believing that they attack it repeatedly, because maybe it's a paradigm thing. People need to defend their paradigm. I mean, that because that's part of their identity, and so, but it is tragic. To me, maybe they're just fine being unbelievers, and I guess they can certainly do whatever they want. Far be it from me to impose my will on them, but I just don't know how you look at all of this, all of that is, and all that we're learning and have yet to learn, and not go, wow, there's such an incredible intelligence behind all of this. There has to be.
I agree with that, and I'm one of those people that doesn't think evolution and the Bible are against each other. I think it's a matter of what you think of as the concept of time,
Right.
what you consider the hand of God forming something. I don't
Right.
think God has a hand like we have that reaches
Sure.
down. I think that an entity or a force like that controls things in different ways, but not like we think of it, and not in the time scale like we think of it. Again, we're going back to perception. How do we have the proper tools to really perceive it all right? In the
Right.
future, some of the things we think of as paranormal, we might think of something as science, or we might even say, no shit, we knew that, we should have always known that's how it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it could come down to something like that without us even realizing it. I mean, because there's things we do today that people
Yeah.
in the past would have never believed.
Right.
Uh, we
If
think of it every day.
Yeah. And if you think about, even like a field of cryptozoology, and then for anybody that doesn't know, that's the suggestion that there's beings out there, much like Bigfoot, Dogman, Loch Ness monster, Champ, and any number of other examples of it are out there, but they're not recognized by our established sciences yet. We're discovering things that were yesterday's cryptids, even still. But one great example is the panda. The panda bear was a cryptid. It was considered an impossible thing that there was this large black and white bear existing in this very green place, and it was a vegetarian. It didn't eat meat. Nobody could wrap their heads around that. This is impossible. It's a fairy tale. It's a fable. And it wasn't until somebody finally got a hold of one of the pelts and brought it in. And they're like, "Oh my God, there must be something to this." And then it took the area where the pandas were found, the giant pandas was a very small area, but it took 60 years of expeditions into this area, and people like, God, they must be so intelligent. They're so far. These are an incredibly intelligent animal. They are avoiding us. Well, we found out that, in the words of Lloyd Pye, that pandas are about as smart as a bag of hammers. They're black and white in a green environment. They should have stuck out like sore thumb, but we couldn't find them for 60 years. And so, yesterday's science fiction is today's science fact.
It makes you wonder about, while you're saying that, makes me wonder about the perception.
Mm.
Maybe they didn't see it because they didn't want to see it,
Or they
or
weren't able to. Yeah, yeah, good point.
there was just some reasoning behind I mean, that sounds like weird in itself, but sometimes I've seen things, real things, not even things you'd consider paranormal, but
Sure.
your brain will be like, what? What am I at?
Yeah.
And then you kind of digest it, and it's just because it's something out of the normal that you wouldn't expect,
Right.
and your brain just doesn't want to grasp it.
Hmm.
So they could even have walked by one maybe and not seen it because they just didn't want to perceive it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to believe that they didn't. Maybe they were ducks or something, and they were black and white ducks, and in their mind they just thought, oh, well, that must be part of the ducks. And then you think, well, how could they think that? I don't know. That's just an example, but I mean, it's
Right.
interesting. But
It
now
is.
that they know there's pandas, guess what? Once they probably discovered the first panda, lo and behold, they probably discovered other pandas. Like all of a
Right.
sudden,
They're
they're
coming
all
out of the woodwork. Yeah.
exactly. But again, it sounds to me like the same story that they were probably saying that they had the ability to meld into the shadows,
Oh, sure.
and you know,
Yeah.
so
That is a great point, though, because I do think that on some level we are very profound creators of our experience. And if you're, there is something to do with perception with this stuff. I was just interviewing Ronnie LeBlanc of Expedition Bigfoot on the Discovery Channel, and he was telling me a story that was told to him by one of the people that experienced it, and he brought this up. He's like, we were talking about perception. He goes, there's something very profound to that, because I talked to this person and he told me this story, and this person was an adamant believer in Bigfoot, absolutely was certain that there's Bigfoot out there. And he decided to take two friends with him to go out, and they were going to find a Bigfoot because there was a lot of reports in the certain area they were going to go to. So the second person was open to the idea, like, yeah, maybe there's something to this. Let's go check it out. And the third person was absolutely skeptical. There's
hmm,
no way this exists. There's no possible way that this is happening out there. This is all a bunch of hooey and whatever. So they go out, and this is in the words of Ronnie LeBlanc. It's not my own story, so I'm just sharing what he shared with me. He said they went through this area and they could start hearing the popping in the woods. Something was around them. They had the feelings and such. Well, two of the three did. And then suddenly, on the path in front of them up in the mountains, out steps this, 8+ foot tall Bigfoot. Huge thing. Now, the guy that believed in it wholeheartedly, he was able to see it, explain, describe it, and go into all kinds of detail about what he was observing. The person with the open mind was like, yeah, I think there's something to this, was able to see a Bigfoot shaped shadow, a silhouette. The third person, who was a non-believer, even though this is happening right in front of him, saw absolutely nothing. Said, I don't know what you guys are going on about. There's nothing. What are you talking about? So is that kind of what you're getting to? Like, one person was absolutely open to receiving it. The other one was at least willing to entertain the idea, and the other person was absolutely closed-minded. Like, there's no way. And yet all three of them in the same moment at the same place, seeing the same field of view, had completely different experiences.
see, that is very interesting, and that makes me think of other things that have happened in history too. Look at the 4 minute mile,
Mm, yeah, those barriers.
or the 500-pound bench press.
Yeah, they were
You know,
walls. Nobody could
things
get
that
past.
people said people couldn't do and wouldn't be able to do. And the minute somebody does it, guess what? Other people are able to do it.
Right.
And it's funny you brought up that whole thing about the panda, because I mean, I give it the benefit of the doubt there that the Bigfoot could be like the panda.
Sure.
Maybe he is there.
Right.
They didn't know the panda was there, and people, how could they not find the panda? Because I don't think they really wanted to find the panda.
Right.
A
Or they
few
just,
people really wanted to, and the other people were just like, "Oh, I don't believe it."
it's a
And I
waste
think,
of time.
and
Yep.
even in the perception, they just didn't want to see it,
Yeah.
and did not, what they might have seen and investigated, they did not see to investigate. Let me put it that way,
Sure.
because they did not want to perceive it. But that's a good point about a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, people claim that they use the scientific method. The scientific method. You got to use the scientific method, but honestly, I don't think most scientists utilize the scientific method. Especially when they're saying there's no such thing as UFOs, no such thing as Bigfoot. There's no such because the true scientific method is you have to be open to every possibility or eventuality until it can be tested and methodically removed as a possibility. Well, you don't say there's no Bigfoot out there when you've never gone out there and effectively, looked and dedicated all the resources and energy and, utilizing all research techniques can find no evidence. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, it is interesting way to think about it. Makes you think about a lot of things,
Yeah.
and
Um,
it makes me even think of it kind of reversing it as far as some of these people. Now, this is a little weird here for you. This probably seems, I don't know, it seems, but like that woman that started that health company where the testing device, and it was supposed to take your test, blood sample, and give you a report right away. You didn't have to wait for. And she told the story that they were working it out and they almost had it and it was working and this and that. And she got thrown in prison for basically lying a lot and getting a lot of backers. But like Rite Aid or CVS had it in their stores, and all kinds of people were backing it. And my point is, just like people can not believe things exist or make things not exist because they don't believe, what
right.
about the things that go on in our world that really don't exist, but we're kind of told they do, and people might believe they exist when they don't? I mean, that's the other side of the seesaw kind of with things like this.
Well, I mean, if you consider the poltergeist experience, many researchers believe that it's actually a subconscious projection from somebody in the household. Like, generally speaking, in most cases that have been actively studied, it seems to center around pubescent or prepubescent girls, but not exclusively. And somehow, through their changes and stuff, they're just really amped up on their psychokinetic abilities and somehow subconsciously manifesting this incredible activity, which is generally pretty short lived, and then is over. Yeah, I think in a lot of hauntings, what you're talking about, I think is very powerful because I do believe in several hauntings. For instance, if you hear about pretty much every major city has a hotel or hotels that claim they have the bride ghost. Now, the bride ghost is a real common trope where there's a jilted bride. She was stood up at the altar, or the husband just didn't go through with it, or whatever, and she was left alone, to go to the honeymoon suite in such a great state of despair. She basically unalives herself and now continues to haunt the place. Well, could there really be that many of these women that were, absolutely stood up at the altar? That there's one in every almost every city has the bride ghost. But if people believe that something is there, can they inadvertently manifest it? Can they create it? Now, the Buddhists have an idea called tulpas, and that's by like essentially a thought form. Like if you believe in something or give it enough energy, you can cause it to exist. And I think in some of these haunting cases, this could be exactly what's going on. And if you believe there's a bride spirit there, chances are you probably have a good chance of experiencing it, or at least experiencing something that you're going to attribute to that because you might be subconsciously manifesting it. So,
No, I think there's probably Craigslist. It's like Ghost List, where it lists jobs. So and so hotel in this city needs ghosts to
post bride.
pretend to be bride, jilted ghost. Apply.
Yeah,
Hey, I'm going to go be a jilted bride at the hotel in Baltimore.
yeah,
That could be a good story on itself. But
good.
yeah, I kind of see that too. And I've always thought about the ghost thing sometimes in a couple ways. I think of it as there can actually be disembodied spirits places. I
Mhm.
also think about it as far as that I believe sometimes that things that happen could be like snapshotted in places.
Residual.
People about this with the lake keys and stuff, and how the electromagnetic fields could catch almost like a recording of an event.
Sure. Yep.
And what you might be seeing is a recording of an event that was naturally caught and is preserved and showed if the situation is proper and right. And I think
Yep.
that's an interesting idea, but that doesn't still make me think that there couldn't be possible places where other actual ghosts exist. We
Oh,
we had experience one time. My girlfriend always said she wanted to see a ghost, and we stayed at a bunch of bed and breakfasts that were, I call them hysteric, but it was historic. And we were there by ourselves one night in the room. I picked the room that was supposed to be haunted,
uh-huh.
and in the middle of the night, the one door was slamming, and she was scared that somebody might have, because it was just us, broke in. And but I wasn't too worried because I didn't hear anything after that. But in the morning we got up and the one big door was open. I thought by this time the owner was there cooking breakfast, and I thought maybe he opened it for the air, but he
Uh-huh.
had never come upstairs, opened the door, and it was off a balcony that there is no stairs to get to the balcony from the outside. And he said, well, it was probably the wind. And we're like, this is a pretty strong door, and there really wasn't much wind last night.
Yeah.
But it didn't bother me because that's, I mean, I hate to say it, somebody asked me that before too. I fear the living more than the dead.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very interesting situation because it did get banged open and stuff, and you could hear what sounded like people out there, but nobody was in the building,
Yeah.
and it did leave us alone. Uh, but I mean, funny thing, she says she never wants to go back down there again. She
Careful
never
what
wants
you wish for.
she never wants to stay in a place where the owners aren't there,
Yeah.
where it's a known haunted place where nobody's there but you. But I'd stay there again. It was kind of interesting.
That sounds like a fascinating place, and I'm with you. I've done several investigations, and I've experienced. I used to live in a pretty haunted couple of houses actually, and a lot of activity. But in every one of those cases, and I don't know. I'm not trying to sound like I'm so in control or in charge or fearless, but I never felt like I was in danger in any way. I just thought that I was being shown something incredible. I've always treated it that way, like, well, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. Now I'm seeing it. It's like perfect. Yeah, I don't understand those ghost shows where, some of the people are like these profound events happen and they're like, it's like, why are you there? What are you doing? Why are
That is
you running?
that is a good point. This is what you wanted. Why are you going the other way?
It's,
Yeah.
it's like going to the ice cream stand when you know you're lactose intolerant. It's like, well, maybe that's not the best choice, you know?
Yeah, but there are that do that. So
True
there's,
enough. True enough.
there's probably more people that do that than run from the ghosts.
Fair
But
enough.
I guess we've probably been on here pretty long. I don't know what Brent that you'd like to get out there to my viewers and mention to them about your show or anything upcoming or in the past that's up that they could see,
Sure.
or what you'd like my viewers to know or see about you.
Well, just again, more information. My website, that's kind of the main hub for the shows, is paranormalportal.net. And that's where all my social media is linked and the YouTube channel is linked. The podcast is audio, and you can find it on Spotify, Pandora, Google Play, Stitcher, Castbox, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and pretty much everyone out there. I don't know of any platforms that it's not available on. So if you have a cell phone, whether it's Android or iPhone, just hit the button that comes with it that says podcast, search for Paranormal Portal. There's over 300 episodes or 350, something like that. Lots of episodes to pick from on the podcast. We're on just started season 6 now, and there's some great stuff. Now I do video podcasts as well, and you can find those on either Rumble by looking for Paranormal Portal, or you can find them on YouTube or BitChute. But YouTube, it's youtube.com/paranormal portal is my main channel. And that's where you can find the video podcasts. I have some great episodes. Well, they're all great. I just haven't been doing the video version of the podcast for very long. Just, I think I've got 5 episodes up now. One of them is George Norrie of Coast to Coast AM. He was just on a couple of weeks ago. Another one was Ronnie LeBlanc, which I mentioned. Dave Schrader of Darkness Radio and stuff. We've had a great talk, and I'm always doing more. So I'd love if you come and check them out. If you're into the paranormal, I'd love for you to be a part of what we're doing.
Well, I hope people that have watched this now, I'll put your main link below, and you said that links them to everything.
Yeah, all
So
the things are tied into there. Yes.
I'll tell you what topics would you want to throw out there that might have been some of the most recent shows that people
Um,
wet their whistle or making them interested in?
Well, the very last podcast that's live now, and I'm just working actually on the video aspect of that now that I'm going to release hopefully later today, is an interview I did with Michael Freeman, and it's a Bigfoot based interview. His father was Paul Freeman, who recorded the Freeman footage, which is pretty much right up there with the Patterson Gimlin film as far as his body of work. Incredible guy, and Michael's an incredible guy as well. And we had a great talk. Paul's passed away. Before that was George Norrie, and we talked mostly about UFO stuff, which was fascinating, as well as George's, his career, his journey, which I thought was really fascinating to have him on the show and talk with him. But we cover all the topics, a lot of hauntings, a lot of UFO stuff. I've talked to abductees throughout the years, and some really powerful experiences. So I think there's something for everybody if you're into the paranormal umbrella of interest or Fortean topics. Hopefully you'll find something you like.
Well, I hope people watch this, listen to this, and hopefully it gets them interested and they get on there and research your different shows and watch your old shows and your new shows and listen to them, since some of them are just audio, and enjoy it and become fans. I wish you lots of luck with all this in the future. And like I said, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we think of as paranormal today might be science tomorrow. That's why, like I said before, I love that statement in the Thor movie. What you think of as magic, we think of as technology, because you
Sure.
don't know. And there's a lot of things we don't know. And you just gotta, some things you gotta, like you said about the melting Bigfoots, that might strike you at first as but like maybe there's something we're gonna find out that we don't know about. So that's what it's all about. But thank you for being with us today, Brent.
Thank
And
you, sir.
people will check you out and see more about what's going on.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
Thank you.